Welcome to my coetail final project video. I'm currently a grade 7 humanities teacher, and I believe that school should not be preparation for life. I think students should think of themselves from the get-go as readers, writers, communicators, artists, musicians, scientists, historians, and whatever else they're becoming. My primary aim in teaching is to work with students as they become people of character and contribution, which includes becoming local citizens, global citizens, and digital citizens. My background is principally in teaching English and literacy, so I'm a fan of reading voraciously and ditching textbooks in favor of media, visual, and information literacy. With technology, I don't think filtering or limiting student access is the answer. Telling someone they cannot have access to something or making choices for them only limits their potential. Instead, we should challenge them to creatively overcome obstacles, to discover new ways to communicate, and to collaborate, to learn, and accomplish their goals. In humanities, students undertake a long-term study of the 3 monotheistic religions, which eventually culminates in an examination of present-day Israel and a peace summit in which students represent countries in a debate about the merits of a one-state versus a two-state solution. This is where this project is situated. I needed to find a way for students to understand the history of Israel and the conflicts with its Palestinian citizens and Arab neighbors. However, in the past, students had been given printed booklets with this information, and teachers delivered PowerPoints to inform students about this history. So I came up with the idea that we would create a collaborative timeline of the events. We had done this in the past physically on the wall of my class when we read a novel together. So I began by selecting standards, starting with social studies standards from Arrow that we follow, as well as ISTE standards for communication and collaboration, research and information fluency, and digital citizenship that the students would use throughout. I first explained the project to students on my blog with links to 2 very lengthy documents containing significant dates and summaries. I felt students would need a basic guide to provide some aim for their historical research. I printed these as well so that students could sign off when they had covered a date or a certain topic. The first document came from a teacher resource, and the second came from PBS and contained both Israeli and Palestinian views on important events. Our project would be to learn this history collaboratively by creating a timeline using Google Slides. All of us could work simultaneously and contribute to the collective understanding that we would all gain. I asked students to think as historians. We wanted to construct a narrative showing the causes and effects throughout the history of Israel and this conflict. They would search especially for primary sources, maps, and visual information, as well as opposing perspectives that should be included. I created a model slide to remind students of our previous discussions of slide design. These slides would not follow the presentation Zen method of Gar Reynolds, and they were not quite infographics, but we aimed for somewhere in between. Additionally, we talked about digital citizenship and decided for this purpose that we would link all information and images to their sources rather than cluttering the slides with citations. The process worked smoothly, and we spent about a week of block classes on this. Working solo or with a partner, students initially chose a date or event toward the beginning of the history. When they finished with one, they would leapfrog ahead of others to another date that needed to be researched. This provided a bit of choice and variety, as some wanted to know more about wars, while others were more interested in negotiations. As students worked, the conversations in the room proved to be fantastic. We discussed the validity and limitations of Wikipedia as a source. I periodically threw out questions about what sovereignty issues and causes and effects students noticed to keep them thinking about the social studies standards we were targeting. Students read the slides before and after theirs to understand the connections. Now and then, something would happen with a slide or part of the information disappearing, and students problem solved this by checking the revision history to see where the erroneous changes had been made. Along the way, I circulated to help with a variety of ways, and our process also afforded me time to sit down for mini sessions to edit with students. When students wanted to take a break or at the end of this whole process, I encouraged them to look through others' slides to suggest improvements. Sometimes they did this through discussion, and sometimes they left comments on the slides for their peers to consider later. Along the way, students also studied essential vocabulary terms with a bit of a gamified social learning on Quizlet, and they also learned the basic political geography of the Middle East and completed quizzes to demonstrate their learning. To provide students with a more robust understanding of the history, and particularly to prompt discussion of bias and various points of view around this region, I curated a YouTube playlist that included a range of perspectives and voices on issues in this conflict. To sharpen students' listening and note-taking from the video, I would divide the class into groups, with half taking notes on facts and the other half listening keenly for bias. They entered facts, quotes, and biases they detected in a today's meet space so that we could later re-examine and discuss their ideas. This guaranteed that all students participated and helped them learn from one another. Plus, it provided me with a transcript of their thinking. Finally, the timeline slideshow was posted on my blog for other classes and parents to see. I also printed the slides to make a horizontal physical timeline on the walls of my classroom. From here, students completed a final individual assessment, writing about their understanding of sovereignty, cause and effect, and the value of primary and secondary sources in historical research, using examples from the timeline. From their responses, I found that this was a highly effective method for students to learn about this history. I also surveyed students to ask their opinions about how and what they had learned from this project. Most said that they enjoyed it, that they liked it better than using an online textbook that we had been with earlier. They felt like they had a good understanding of the history, why Israel had been created, and why there were tensions in various ways. And I also asked them how they had felt like this had helped them in terms of their use of slides, their search skills, and their collaborative learning. Overall, their responses were very positive. In the end, when I consider where this project would rank on the SAMR ladder, I do think it should be seen as a redefinition of the way students study history and learn about communication. My class used technology to collaboratively construct understanding and to create a product that was then useful for us and perhaps a wider audience to learn from. The way that students taught one another through the connectedness of technology could not have happened or been accomplished with a set of textbooks and a poster presentation. I, as the teacher, did make the principal choices of what would be learned, and I also selected the key tools. However, students played a significant role in the process. The ISTE standards we aimed for have been met. Students collaborated, they selected and evaluated and presented information, and they practiced digital citizenship. This will provide them a good scaffolded step toward more independent research as we now head into the Peace Summit to follow.